Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. Has appropriate meeting notification been made?
Yes, Your Honor, it has.
Would you call roll, please?
Shell Pepper. Alderman Maroney.
Here.
Alderman Douglas.
Here.
Alderman Rozak.
Here.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Here.
Alderman Ellis.
Here.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Here.
Alderman Mulder.
Here.
Work right into committee business. Overview of the 2024 to 2028 capital budget plan.
Ready, set, here we go
You
again.
bet. Let's do it.
Okay, so budget season starts with the capital plan. We take a look at a 5-year outlook of what the anticipated capital projects are in the city coming forward in the future. Really kind of gives us a blueprint, gives you an idea of what's coming up and what the departments are looking at needing infrastructure and equipment-wise. So for the 2024 capital request, so for this budget season, one of the things, we got to step back to last year just for a second, because at the 2023 budget workshop, the council approved both the 23 and 24 capital plans. The 23 capital plan is being implemented now, and as discussed, some of the 24 capital items have had to be ordered in advance, which is why we approved both years last year. So what's going on now is the departments have reviewed all the capital needs for 24 through 28, made some adjustments to that, and at the budget workshop, we'll review. I have a worksheet in the book for you that reviews both what was approved, what the changes are, the difference, you know, that kind of thing. That's what we'll kind of focus on. One other thing that we're going to do just a little bit differently is I made you a worksheet that has all of the fleet requests on one sheet. So whether it's city or it's utility, all fleet is together. What we're hoping to accomplish this year is to review the changes to 2024, approve a 2024 capital plan, and then for fleet, we would look at approving a 24 and 25, mostly just because of still the supply issues in the bigger trucks and that kind of thing. So in this PowerPoint, which is in your workbook, I did just give you a quick look at what was approved in 2024 and the funding plan we had for it, and the same for the utilities. So let's take a look at these workbooks. In the workbook, in the front pocket, you've got some handouts. The first thing you've got is a copy of this PowerPoint right here. After that, you've got 2 worksheets that show you what I was just talking about. The green column is what was approved for 2024. The second column is what's requested in 2024. I highlighted it blue if you haven't seen it before, if it's new. I highlighted it yellow if it's something that we moved to a different, or pink there, if we moved it to a different year. So go ahead and take a look at these, because this is what we're going to focus on at the first workshop, okay? And then I also have a packet of memos that the department heads provided for those items that are in blue, kind of explaining why they're in 2024 and why they need them. So then the main section of the workbook is the same as you've had before. The first section is the city capital request with all the backup sheets. It has a big spreadsheet on the front, tells you what page everything's on if you want to look at the backup sheets. The second section, utilities, same way. Spreadsheet first, tells you what the page numbers are, what year they're requesting things, how much it is. Take a look at that. The other thing you can do, and you'll notice in your email that I sent you an invitation to a shared folder I have that has this workbook in it. When you get your invitation, it'll look like this on the screen. You click on that blue open right there, and it will take you to a page that looks like this. Here's the city worksheets, here's the utility worksheets. You click on that, and what you want to do is download them, because they're really big spreadsheets and they're not going to open online here for you. You're going to have to download it to your computer. So, you know, what's the advantage of doing that? Well, here's my worksheet. If you have the worksheet on your computer, all of these are links. So if you click on this, you say, hey, what is this pickup number 92? You click on it, it takes you right to that page. So you don't have to be paging through the book and trying to see if you're on the right page. And then in the PowerPoint, I put the little trick for you. It's in here. So you're here and you're way over here. Well, I can see the first page, so I can click on it. But say you were down here somewhere and you're clicked on a link, and now you can't see that first page anymore. You don't need to scroll, scroll, scroll. All you need to do is see this little arrow right here. You hold your control button down and click this arrow, takes you back to the first page. Okay? That's in the PowerPoint if you forget. Anyway, that's a really good way to look at this. You can have your spreadsheet open in front of you, and you can be getting to the backup sheets on the electronic document. If you have any questions or problems with that, just let me know, and I'll help you through it.
I have questions and problems.
You have what?
I have questions and problems.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Oh, okay.
All right, let me finish up here. We're almost done. And this is the page that shows you that control button plus that and how this works. So for our workshops, which are July 25th and 27th next week, Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to focus on the 2024 capital requests. Tuesday's workshop is going to start with a presentation from Rupert Milke on street funding alternatives that include transportation utilities and wheel tax. This is just pros and cons and overview, high-level information. This isn't about making decisions about this. It's just to give you the information as we move forward. On that day, we're going to review the city projects, which is clerk, police, public works, library, and parks. Then on Thursday, when we come back, we're going to take a look at wastewater, water, electric, and then the fleet as a whole group plan. The committee of the whole workshops here, the goal really is to approve the 2024 capital funding as adjusted for both the city and the utilities, to approve 24 and 25 capital funding for fleet, and then a consensus on the 25 through 28, kind of a nod. Doesn't mean it's approved. It means you've looked at it, you've asked questions about it. Those will all likely have changes to them when we come back again next year. So, as I said, questions, problems, reach out to me. I will help you through it. Take a look at your workbooks and bring them with you next week, Tuesday, 5:30? 6 o'clock, sorry. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
I have a question.
Oh, I have
Go
a
ahead.
question quick. Thank you, Mayor. So we approved 2023 and 2024 last time around.
Yep.
But yet we do have a lot of additional 2024 requests. Why so many more additional requests?
Yeah, and that's what the memos are for, to help you out with that. Some of those were budget priority items that the departments brought to you the last couple of months, like the handguns and tasers for the
Sure.
police. A couple things in the utilities. I think the Badger books are in there. So a lot of those things you'll recognize as things that we've already talked about.
What are we doing to spend our money, or what are we're getting all the new shared revenue. Are
Yeah.
we using that in capital at all?
I actually don't have it right now recommended in capital. We'll talk about that more as
Our capital
we
bud-
go along.
The capital budget as presented is coming out of our normal funding that we normally.
Our normal funding and use of fund balance, fund reserves, yep.
Is it indicated in here where when we're using fund reserves for this stuff?
Yeah, so basically, if you take a look at your worksheets in the pocket,
Yeah,
and the first one that is the city plan,
right?
at the bottom,
Yeah, I
you
see
can
it
see
now.
what the approved funding was in '24 last year, and then what we're looking at for the approval with the changes to it. So basically, we're using $400,000 worth of ARPA funding. That was already approved. Those are for trucks. And then we have fund balance that last year we approved $250,000, and we're looking at using an additional $350,000. We're looking at, Mark is going to put forward a plan that uses about $600,000 of fund balance reserves every year for the next few years to help spend that down.
Thank you.
My question is,
Alderman Ellis?
thank you. All of this will be on the computer.
The sheets that are in the pocket are not. The whole workbook, the workbook part is. These are not. These you will have in front of you and talk through them.
What is this part again? That was in the pocket right here?
So
was-
that focuses on 2024.
Yeah, oh, okay, got it.
Okay? The
got it,
green
yeah.
column is what was approved last year.
Yeah.
The next column is what's being requested this year. Then there's a column that shows the difference between this year and last year.
Makes sense.
Can we put that on the computer?
I can send it to you, sure.
Thank you.
Yep, if you want it, I will send it to you. I have it on my computer. I can send it to you.
Well, the only reason why I say that is because the writing is very, very, very small,
Okay,
and it gives me the ability to enlarge
make
it.
it bigger?
Yes.
Yep, absolutely, I can do
Thank you.
that. I'll send those out to you, and then you can save them on your own computers if you like.
Thank you.
The sheets that are in the pocket. Actually, I'll put them, I already put the
they won't, because
PowerPoint.
we have two.
I'll put those other 2 sheets right in that shared drive, so you can just download everything.
We'll talk about it.
Okay?
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, everyone.
Any
See
other
ya.
questions for Lori? I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great.
Thank
We
you.
have a few minutes, and we'll start right at 7:30 with the common council meeting.
you see, we only have 6 properties that are on the National Register, so we're not anticipating that there's going to be hundreds of properties listed on the local register. So we don't anticipate them needing to meet every single month, but they would just meet on an as-needed basis after the regularly scheduled Architectural Commission meeting, which happens every month. And then their job would be to recommend local historic designations to you guys, the council. And then in addition, they would be able to grant certificates of appropriateness, which I'll get into a little bit later. But because you have already seen a draft of this ordinance before, we just wanted to give you some updates about what the major changes are. First of all, the biggest one is that in the previous draft, there was some options for the commission to nominate a property to become historic. This ordinance, as it is now, leaves that nomination process completely up to the property owner. So it is completely voluntary now. We wanted to make it so that the property owner is the one putting their own property on the register, not somebody else telling them that they have to do it. So everything is initiated by the property owner now. In addition, we eliminated the historic districts option. So previously there was a choice to create multiple properties in an area and have that be a historic district. It was a pretty complicated process, and it didn't require always having 100% of those property owners in agreement with that, so we wanted to kind of get rid of that and simplify this, streamline this, make it an easier to understand ordinance. So what we have now is pretty much 2 categories. We have historic structures, which would be like a house or some sort of fence or something like that, or we have a site, which would be the parcel itself. So those are our 2 big categories. And then other big changes, we previously had this listed as a separate chapter in our municipal code. Now, under advisement from our city attorney, we have it as being incorporated directly into the zoning code. We already have sections in there about Plan Commission and Architectural Commission, so we thought we will add this right in there. It fits in very well. And then we've also updated some of the standards that we have for review in this ordinance and made it a little bit clearer and a little bit more detailed as far as the criteria that we're looking for what designates a property or what makes a property qualify to be historic. Those are the big changes. It all kind of boils down to this pretty basic process. As I mentioned before, in order for a property to be considered locally historic, the property owner has to initiate it. In your packets, you received some nomination forms, so we had some ideas about what this nomination form would look like. There would be no fee to the property owner for that. Then it would be going on to the Historic Preservation Commission for recommendation. Once they make their recommendation, state statute requires that there is a public hearing held for historic designation. So that would happen at Common Council, and then the council would be the final authority to decide whether the property can be designated as historic. And the same process works in reverse as well for if you want to eliminate your designation. So if somebody says my property is historic and I don't want that designation any longer, same process applies. In addition, the planning department, we've kind of been looking into some potential incentives, some things that the city could do to kind of show a little bit of pride in our historic properties. A lot of our National Register places, including this building, have a little plaque. So that's something that we've been looking into in the draft. As it is right now, the property owner is the one who has the ability to obtain this plaque themselves, but we're thinking that perhaps in the future, maybe the city might consider maybe paying for that plaque for people, but as it is right now, it would be initiated by the property owner with kind of approval from the Historic Preservation Commission. So then, in addition to designating properties as historic, once you have a historic property, in order to do any exterior work, you would need to have a certificate of appropriateness, and then this can come in 3 different forms. Any sort of minor work, so if you want to change the color of your house from one shade of white to another, zoning administrator can approve that in-house. Any sort of major work, so you want to do like an addition onto your property, that would come to the Historic Preservation Commission for approval, so they would be the final authority there. And then the only thing that would have to come to council then would be a demolition, so something that's like super major, we're going to tear down a property, that would have to come before you guys. Again, here's our sample forms. we wanted to really emphasize that there's no fee to the applicant because we are asking for this to be voluntary. The property owner is initiating it. They're voluntarily saying, I will come to the commission in order to have changes to my property. So we didn't think that it was fair to charge them a fee on top of that when they're asking, or when we're asking them to voluntarily place themselves on this register. So we kind of eliminated that fee overall just to get people more interested in this as a prospect for their properties. I wanted to quickly go over some of the people that we've contacted. This has been a pretty lengthy process working on this ordinance, and so we have reached out to a bunch of different people to get some feedback. The main one was Jason Tisch at the State Historic Preservation Office. He reviewed this draft. He gave us a lot of comments. We worked most of those comments into this draft. On the next slide, I'll show you a little bit about what he suggested that we didn't include and why not. We also talked to Melissa Lamp at the City of Watertown. They also have a historic preservation program there, so we wanted to get some ideas about incentives. When we took this to Architectural Commission, one of their big comments was that we need to incentivize people to do this. So she was one of the people who we were talking to about what potential incentives can we have for historic preservation. We talked to Jennifer at Legacy Architecture by the recommendation of the Architectural Commission as well. We spoke with our own Bob Duffy in the Economic Development Department, talking about potential incentives and potential funding for those incentives as well. And we also reached out to the people at the Oconomowoc Area Historical Society to get feedback from them as well, and they're in support of this draft. So the comments from Jason Tisch, most of them we incorporated. There were 3 that we did not incorporate into our initial draft. That first one up there, changing the wording from removal of a designation to rescinding of a designation was kind of a minor one. Architectural Commission wanted that included, wanted that change made, so that is in this updated draft. So the 2 comments from Jason that we did not incorporate are allowing the Historic Preservation Commission to be the final decision-making body for demolitions. We felt that demolitions are a pretty big thing, and we thought that you guys would want to have a final say over that, just because it is a pretty major thing to be tearing down a property that is designated as historic. So we did not incorporate that, but feel free to discuss that later when this item is up for discussion later on in this agenda. But the other item that we did not include was considering, he suggested that we consider resolving demolition by neglect noncompliance within the planning department. As it is written in the ordinance, we will, if there's some sort of issue after the zoning administrator makes contact with the property owner and identifies the violation, it'll go on to the police. And that's kind of how it rolls for everything else with our zoning code, so we wanted to kind of keep it consistent, which is why we didn't incorporate that suggestion either. And then finally, we don't have any, and so we've been talking a lot about incentives, and that was one huge thing brought up at the commission meeting earlier this month. And we've been looking into a lot of options. We've been talking with a lot of people about this. We don't have anything written into this draft currently, but we wanted to give you some ideas about, okay, maybe after this draft is adopted, what kinds of things can we look for in the future? So we have an existing downtown facade grant program. So one thing we were thinking about in the planning department was maybe we expand that program a little bit. Maybe we offer some sort of, we have a facade grant for the people downtown. Maybe we make one for the people who own historic properties, something similar to that. Watertown, we found out, has a revolving loan fund for historic properties, so that's something that we could consider. And then also looking into potential tax credits for owners of historic properties. It doesn't look like, based on the research that we've done in the planning department, it doesn't look like a lot of communities around here offer local tax incentives like that. But there are state incentives that if you are on the national or state registers, you can qualify for those incentives. But that would be something to consider that we had heard brought up, is the idea of potential tax credits. So we wanted you guys to be aware of those things, just thinking, knowing that we're still researching that, still going forward, looking into those options for what can we do to motivate people to want to put their property on this register. So the next steps, now that you kind of have an idea of what this ordinance is about, would be for you guys to take action on it tonight. And then as I just mentioned, in the future, consider those incentive options. And then the State Historic Preservation Office does offer a certified local government program, which would allow us to qualify for additional funding. So that would be something that we could also look into going forward. So those are kind of our next steps, and that's kind of the gist of this ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to open the public hearing. If you want to speak at the public hearing, there are blue cards. Please come and fill them up. I have one person that wants to speak on this public hearing. If somebody else would like to, please fill that out. The Historic Preservation Ordinance, the purpose of this is to hear public comment for the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment that rescinds and recreates Section 17.705 pertaining to historic preservation and creates Section 17.706, which renumbers the former section pertaining to the role of the zoning administrator. The text amendment establishes a Historic Preservation Commission, the nomination process for the local historical structures and sites, the process for obtaining the certificate of appropriateness, and the process for demolition of a local historical structures. So at this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. I have one card. If you could please come up, state your name and address. Lou Kavieski.
Hello, Council. My name is Lou Kavieski. I'm a citizen of the city of Oconomowoc and resident at 131 North Locust. I'm here to support the historic preservation ordinance the way it's currently being proposed. There are some concerns. As the presentation was going forward, I saw some heads kind of agreeing with some and disagreeing with others. I don't think the city necessarily needs to provide its own money as incentive, but the state and federal monies that are available once designation has started, I think is a good incentive for the homeowner. I like the ability to insert and remove the properties based on the home ownership associated with that. It's voluntary, it's not mandatory, and it doesn't have a government hand in the introduction of that property into the program, all of which I think are very positive for the community and for preserving, helping to preserve some of those historic sites and structures that are within our community. So I'm really glad to see it on the agenda today. I'm disappointed that it's taken that long to get it here. We are out of compliance as a community, as a city, with state direction, and it's been that way for several years. So I hope in the discussion and debate you find the places of agreement to move that forward and in a positive vote, and we'll see what happens. So thanks very much.
Thank you. David Gilson.
Hi, thank you. I'm a resident right on the Isthmus. We're in one of the historic homes. We are on the museum walk, et cetera. And I just wanted to, first of all, thank you. I'm glad we're finally trying to address something on a permanent situation, because it is difficult fighting these battles one by one and having to continually dodge bullets. But, and I'm not opposed to this proposal at all, and I do think it's going to be tough to get enough people to opt into it personally. I don't know enough about it to know whether there would be enough incentive to have my hands tied as to what I could and could not do with my home. I don't think any of you would want to be told what you could do with your properties. I know we've totally renovated our home. We've got over a couple $100,000 into it, thousands of hours of sweat equity, and you know, it strikes me as it's really nobody's business what I do with my property. But so I don't really want people telling me what I can and can't do with it, understandably. And but I think there's a simpler approach, because most of the homes on this particular isthmus are opposed to condominiums going in over there. And I think we could make simpler rules and not have to worry about whether ordinances get enforced or not, because they don't seem to here. There seems to be exceptions for the developers, and there seems to be no exceptions for the homeowners. So it really is not working the way it should be working. I'd rather have a mutual agreement. It could be contingent upon everybody agreeing to it unanimously on the isthmus, but set some very simple rules, like this property can never have a structure on it that's more than 10 feet higher than the current structure. Can never have more than one additional kitchen than the existing kitchens in there. Can never have more than 2 additional full baths than the number of full baths in there. So make it where you give the homeowners the flexibility to do what they want with their properties within reason. It's not going to be a wholesale change to whatever structure's on that property. And it's going to be a disincentive for developers to come in there and want to do something different with the property. It would work for multifamily units that are already there. It would work for single-family homes like ours. I think you would get an agreement, and the city could just pay whatever legal fees are to update the deeds, and then you never need to worry about what direction the winds are blowing for whoever's sitting in these chairs 10 years from now when a developer comes in and wants to break whatever rules are there or make exceptions and do what they want to do. Get it written right into the deeds. That's my.
Thank you very much. And for the record, Counselor, at your desks, you have a letter from Mr. Gilson. I want to make sure that you see that, and this will be brought into the record, too. Thank you. Any other comments or questions with regard to the public hearing of the Historic Preservation Ordinance? I don't have any other blue card comments. With no one else making a comment on the Historical Preservation Ordinance, the public hearing is now closed, and we'll move on to our next item. I'd like to entertain a motion for the approval of minutes for June 27th, 2023.
Rozak, so moved.
Second. Mulder.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Then we'll move on to comments and suggestions from citizens. We're going to start off with a introduction of our new library director, and I'd like to ask our library person to Jennifer Altman-Kloth. Alderman Kloth, if you could introduce our new director, that would be wonderful. We'd like to have you come up to the podium, please.
So as the alderman that sits on the library board, I'd like to welcome you to our community. So this is our new library director, Jennifer Pacini. She comes from the Burlington Library. A couple things that stood out to me during her interview process. One of the first things that really stuck out was her experience in 2 completely different libraries, the way that between Waterford and Burlington, and just kind of how you adjusted and adapted to those changes, I found impressive. You know, also during your interview process, your just clear respect for serving the community in which you're hired really stood out. One particular thing that you shared in your second interview that really got me was when you talked about going to Madison to borrow a war memorial, and took it to a local senior living facility over the Memorial Day weekend and honored the veterans that were there and honored the people that fought for our country. And we're a community that has a very, very rich veteran community. We're very blessed. We have a very active VFW. We have a very active Legion. We teach our kids patriotism, and we teach them to honor those that served. So you're going to fit in very well here with that, so I appreciate that. And then, you know, of course, you're a fellow Jennifer, so we're going to get along really well. But if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer, for introducing me. And thank you guys for having me here tonight. I am very excited about this new position that I'll be starting August 7th. I love libraries. I love the library that I work at, but I just decided that it was time for a change and more of a challenge. And when your opened up, I love your community. I don't know a lot about it yet, but I love this area. I am really excited to get to know the community better and to create strong relationships. I believe in that. I believe strong relationships in the community and the library is really important. I'm excited to get to know all of you guys better and to work with you guys. I believe it seems like you guys are really supportive of the library, and that's really important. So yeah, I'm just really excited. I do bring 10 years of experience, and we did a lot of changes at my library that really have been beneficial to the library and to our patrons. So I'm really excited to bring like the ideas and the programs we developed and share them at this library and with this community. I'm very excited. I think it's going to be great. It'll take me a while to get situated and get to know the staff, and then we'll kind of move forward, and it's going to be really nice. Just a little bit about me. I am married. I've been married for 20 years. I have 2 teenage girls, 16 and 17 years old. I live in Waterford, so I have a little bit of a drive, but I'm looking forward to it. And in a few years, my kids will be in college, so, you know, maybe I'll move out in this direction. So, any questions for me?
Council members, if you'd like to ask any questions, you're welcome to at this time. And personally, welcome. We have not met, and I look forward to getting to know you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
lucky
Well,
today,
thank
no
you,
questions.
and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming tonight. All right, on to public comments. We're going to start off with Jane Owen.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My name is Jane Owen, longtime part of the community. My comment is about communication. I'm glad to see that you're bringing up the historical ordinance, kind of a turnaround from 2 years ago and nobody touching it except me bringing it up many times. But it's well overdue. In fact, the state came up with it 30 years ago and even extended the time for the community to do it, and the community knew about it. Even under the last city attorney, who didn't do it. So what do? We named a park after him and took it off the tax roll and put it on the taxpayer back. Meanwhile, more historic buildings have been torn down. Most recently, another one on North Lake Road, about the 700 or 800 block, directly across from Margie Ward's, further destroying the fabric, culture, identity, history of this community. This is long overdue. 2 years ago, when it was brought up, part of the comments back from the elected and appointed officials was it didn't have enough teeth. And they're bringing back an even looser version that almost mimics the state statute now. What comes from Mr. Tisch, anytime you call Madison and the State Historical Society, first thing he will say when he asks on the phone, with whom am I speaking? And the matter of your business is, this is not legal advice. I strongly urge you to come up with the strongest and strictest ordinance that you can. In the last 30 years, I would just guess, before I go back and research property tax records, this community has torn down houses almost as fast as we tore down trees, which is about 300 trees in the last 3 years, no matter how much somebody says they love trees. So as a reminder, any structure that's 50 years or older can be on it. Any structure that is related to an important person, which could be Catherine Clark or Martin Luther King Jr., or an important event, maybe a presidential visit like when JFK came here, is eligible for this. And I strongly urge you to come up with a much tougher measure to save what little is left of the city of Oconomowoc. It's about time to end this, well, in my words, 30-year gag order, one of the longest gag orders in the city, and take care of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Kavieski.
This is kind of a continuation. I don't have to say my name and stuff.
But if you remember in your last meeting, I said, I'm going to give you more than 3 minutes.
I won't take more than 3
So
minutes.
if you need more than 3, it's perfectly fine.
I won't do that. I did that for 6 years. All right, so the reason I didn't talk about this particular thing during the last time I was up is this is pertaining to zoning, not the ordinance that you're considering tonight. The zoning for the isthmus was discussed by one of the residents. The zoning for the isthmus is a separate topic, and the zoning for the isthmus should be readdressed through the Planning Commission and through this body. No changes to the isthmus zoning within our code has been addressed since we came into some gray areas that resulted in legal action that put 517 and 525 into a precarious position. I believe that the Plan Commission should take up the isthmus zoning as soon as possible. It should have, in my opinion, should have been done as soon as the lawsuit was settled back in 2021, when that shook out. And that'll help to mitigate potential issues legally and keep Stan Riffle off our payroll as it plays to that.
But you like me.
I love you, man. There's gonna be so much more. But it needs to be more black and white. We need to, we know where the gray is because those are the issues that put us into that legal position. Address them, clear them up, and let's move on with a clean isthmus zoning district. So please consider doing that sooner than later.
Thank you. And Lou, just so you know, a lot of those things are in the works, not just for the isthmus. And so some of those things just have not been brought to council yet, but they are in the works. You bet. Is there anybody else like to make public comment? With no further comment, let's move on. We'll move on to our consent agenda items. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second, Mulder.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, on to committee reports. We're going to start off with finance. Consider act on the budget amendment for grants and donations received and the use of fund balance reserves, second quarter 2023. Ms. Sullivan Murray.
Thank you. In your packet is your second quarter report of the grants and donations that have come into the city. Of note is the $40,800 that we got for the K-9 fund. So you can see the support is going well for that program. Also in here, you'll see that we've got donations for fireworks, for trees, for the porta potties on the Village Green. And then at the bottom of the worksheet that you're looking at there, there's a budget amendment that is for the use of donated funds that we have accepted previously. So we weren't ready to spend it yet. It went into a reserve, and now those funds are being spent, so I need a budget amendment for it. And that's what that is at the bottom. If you have
Any questions or comments for Ms. Sullivan Murray? Like to entertain a motion, please?
So moved, Altman Cloth.
Second, Ellis.
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
On to utilities, consider act on resolution 23-R3147, awarding the contract for the iron filter pilot testing.
Hey, thank you. Earlier this year, in March, utility staff came to council for direction on how to approach the higher iron levels for the proposed well 8. So we presented adding polyphosphates or adding a filter, and we were given direction to add a filter. So we went out with our consulting engineer and did an RFP to do a pilot study to further design that filter for well 8. In addition, we included well 4 and 6, which is part of our long-term financial plan to investigate some water quality issues up there and future filter that. So tonight I'm looking for a motion to adopt the resolution 23-R3147 to award the iron filter pilot testing.
Any questions or comments, council? Like to entertain a motion?
So moved, Ellis.
Second.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
And for the audience, these things were discussed in greater depth in committee just before the council meeting tonight. On to Plan Commission items, consider act on ordinance 23-01049 to repeal and recreate section 17.705 pertaining to the historic preservation and create section 17.706, which renumbers the section pertaining to the role of the zoning administrator. This was presented in our public hearing, and this, Councilman, is the first reading.
Yes, so the presentation was already given. I'm here, or Mr. Gallo, the zoning administrator, is here as well to answer any questions you may have.
Alderman Mulder.
So, for my own clarification, at this point, homeowners or property owners would have to elect to be on this, to be a historic designation, is that correct?
Yes.
And is there any, besides the National Historic Registry properties, are there any other properties that would be kind of grandfathered into this? Or is it,
No, and in fact, the properties that are on the National Register are not, the way the ordinance is right now, they are not automatically on the local register just because they're on the National Register right now. So if a property like, say, I don't know, the Maxim's Restaurant wants to be on the if this building, yes, wants to be on the local register,
wondering what this was.
it would have to be nominated to be on the local register as well.
okay.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Are there any other properties within the city right now that are kind of in the hopper, or that you potentially have information that wish to do this?
We don't have any properties right now that have expressed explicit interest currently to us, but I'm not sure, I don't know how many people know about the local ordinance yet.
Alderman Mulder.
In speaking with some of the other communities, and I guess Watertown in particular, have they had properties that are volunteering to do this? Because, well, Mr. Gilson's letter was direct unnecessarily. He did make a good point when he was here about why would he volunteer to give away his rights to his property. So it does concern me that we're putting something in place that is not going to have value to the homeowners because we're limiting them without benefit. So do we know that in other communities you've spoken with, how fruitful has this been in getting people to register their properties?
Yeah, so a lot of communities around us don't have it entirely voluntary. So like Watertown, they have their Main Street Historic District, so a lot of their historic properties fall within that established district that's been already established by their local ordinance. So I'm not sure, I didn't ask for counts of how many people have voluntarily done that. But we were thinking about, okay, it is true that we're asking if somebody's gonna be on this register, they do have to come before commission and get things approved. But for properties, you know, perhaps somebody has put a lot of work into their property and they want to ensure that after they sell it, or, you know, after it gets passed on to somebody else, that all of that work that they've put into maintaining the historic nature of their property still stands even after the property is sold. So that's one big draw, I think, that some people would potentially have to place or to nominate their own property because of prior work that has been done. So things like that. And then
Mr.
in
Gallo,
addition-
do you have any comments to add to that? You came up.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of reiterate what Rachel was just saying. It's, you know, if you do a lot of work on your property and you go through the designation, you have the sense that it would be very difficult to have that property demoed, redeveloped into condominiums or something to that effect. So it's, you know, you can leave saying or sell it knowing that it's designated. Plus there's that plaque opportunity, you know, it's a sense of pride in your community knowing that you have a property on the local register. So it's something.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
But you can also voluntarily have the designation taken away.
You can, that would have to be approved by
the council.
you.
Correct.
Yeah, so that would be, and there should be some criteria in the ordinance right now for what makes a property historic, what makes it qualify for the local register. So if somebody were to say, I want this designation removed, there would have to be a significant reason for that.
Okay. Yep.
Alderman Rozak.
Well, I have a lot of concerns and a lot of questions. I'm not quite sure where to start. You answered one of my questions already, which was, once they sell, they stay on the historic registry, right, for the local, and you have to, I guess, move to rescind it. I'm a little confused about what the standard is for rescission. I know that I know that's in there, but it seems rather vague. But let me get to some more specifics first. In the memo, you said that it can't be done by the committee at all, but I think there's a conflict in the statute here, the ordinance. Section 4A on page 2, it has a blanket designation. It says the commission shall have the power subject to the sections of the state statute to recommend the designation. It seems very clear language there that they can designate. Now later on you have the nomination section which talk about the owner nominating. So I feel like there should be some additional language added there. So I want to be clear to the rest of the council, I'm not voting for this ordinance. I don't think we should do it. I think it is a violation of people's rights as homeowners. However, if we are going to do it, I think we should add some language to make it better. And so I'd like to, and we don't have to, I'm not going to make a motion now, but I think under 4A designation, we should add the commission shall have the power only after applied for by the property owner, and then subject to the statutes. I think we should make that change. I also think we should remove under definitions, section 2B talks about improvement. And again, this is where language gets really critical. Improvement means any building, structure, place, work of art, not including painted murals, or other object constituting a physical betterment of real property. That is really, really broad, and to me, very, very vague. So that creates some issues in my head. And again, these are just kind of comments generally. You don't necessarily have to respond to them unless you feel you should. The other thing we have in section 3 on page 2 is the Historic Preservation Commission composition. We're creating a local historical preservation commission manned by 5 people, some of which don't actually live in the city. So I think we should recompose how this commission is. The architectural commissioners are not required to live in the city. Some of them do not. So we're putting homeowners that potentially obviously nominate themselves into control the commission under commission members that don't actually live here. I will also note that our architectural commission has had a variety of issues, including the lawsuit at 517, 525, as well as the approval of Hackney House, which in no sense whatsoever fits that area. So I think we should make a change to that commission composition, whether that's 2 members at Architectural Commission and then other members of the society, actual community that live here, that know the community, or perhaps one person that was, a member of the local Oconomowoc Historical Society or a board member there on it. I think we should play with that section of it. The other thing on section 5, nominations for designation of local historic structure, we should also add only the owner of the property. I just think that's some additional language that should be added in there. Ultimately, I think it's ironic that the state bureaucrat thinks we should be more restrictive. I think we should be less restrictive on people's property rights, and we should be more specific about how we let them out of this if they decide later on this wasn't a good move. So those are my general comments. I'm happy to go over again, I think, some of the changes we should make if we're going to do this, but perhaps, at least in my head, what we should do is try to send them back with some of these suggestions. Again, I'm just one guy in the council suggesting this, but I do think we should take very seriously how we set up this commission, because that's probably the biggest, most important factor, and I don't think it should be the Architectural Commission.
Attorney Riffle.
Alderman Rozak, I had exactly the same reaction as you as it related to the nomination thing, but I carefully looked at that, and it said such designations, the commission shall have the power, it's under 4A, subject to 1705 sub 5 and 6 to recommend, and 170705 or 6, I didn't look at it just now, says the only way it can get to the commission is if it is nominated by a property owner. So I was satisfied with that. As it relates to the composition of the commission, that's a policy thing, up to you guys. But I really don't have a problem, and I carefully reviewed that, because I was going to raise that at the Plan Commission. I was, okay, it's covered.
Would you think, Stan, would you think there'd be any problem with adding the language I suggested?
No, I mean, if you want to have belts and suspenders, that's not a problem either.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Alderman Douglas.
Thank you, though. I think you're right. When you read them together, it seems like the nomination kind of, but the nomination comes after the designation section, so it's a little.
My comment was specifically regarding the rescinding that earlier we talked about the property owner could rescind the designation. However, it's actually saying that, council has the right to give them that ability or not, so they could go on, and it was kind of answered with Alderman Spielberg's question.
Okay. Alderman Ellis.
When I read this over, my question, I was scratching my head, was in number 3, where it talked about the Historic Preservation Commission composition. I just don't understand why they don't have to live in the community at which they're going to be before. And I personally think they really need to have some sort of a stake in the community. It's like me voting for something in Milwaukee. So somebody can explain that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I can explain that if you want to talk about the composition of the committee, the commission. The existing 5 members, they all have some stake in the community. They either live here, which most of them do, and one that I'm aware of lives out of the city. He has a business here. So they all have history in the community. They were chosen, appointed to serve on that committee because of their connections and their care for the city. They have the knowledge, they have experience, they're architects, they are builders, they know architectural styles and design. And I know that you might not agree with that, Alderman Rozak, but I feel they're the most qualified people that are serving. It's extremely challenging to find people that want to serve that have that specific quality and skill. So, and that are available in the evening hours. So that, you know, I think it would be very challenging to find, 5 or 7 additional new members that would be willing to serve in the evening hours.
So the issue is service, more so than it is anything else, because if we change that ordinance, some of them might not be able to participate in that. We will have a problem finding other individuals to.
Well, and what you have to remember is that this council approves the appointment of those commissioners. So there's still that checks and balance in there. And if there is something you want to do to change that makeup, then we would have to address it at that time. But you guys approve them, yes or no?
I don't know, I was just concerned with the fact that, you don't have to be a resident of the community and still make these type of decisions.
Alderman Mulder?
Matt, your comment about property rights, what's interesting is that the owner decides they want to restrict their rights and then decides they want to restrict the rights of a future owner. And so we're rather than the city having a kind of stake in it or making a statement about what we value and what kind of buildings we want, we're letting homeowners do that and kind of a bit willy-nilly. You could have a historic neighborhood with no houses in it. You could have a not historic neighborhood with some in it because it isn't, we don't seem to have a concrete plan around it. So yeah, there is some property rights there, but we're not the ones doing it. So I fail to see how this is going to accomplish much in terms of really preserving historic homes in Oconomowoc. It's so voluntary. And if I had a historic home, I wouldn't register because I wouldn't want to artificially put those restrictions on me, and it actually would lower the value of my home perhaps to sell it in the future. So it'd have to be very altruistic that I want to preserve this for future generations at the expense of my pocketbook, which most people that own these homes probably don't care about that anyway. They're big and beautiful. So I don't know. I'd like to see. I think Jane has made some good points over the years, Ms. Owen, because if we want to have a historic community, then we need to put the proper policies in place to make sure that happens, which would come at the expense of property owners' rights. So it's what are we willing to trade? Right now, we're not trading anything. We're letting people voluntarily restrict themselves and restrict the ability to future owners of their property. So it doesn't feel to me that we're, so as it's written, it's fine if that's our intent. If our intent is to do as little as possible and do something, this feels like it. I don't mean that to be insulting as.
Attorney Riffle?
So, I mean, we're here because we are not compliant, and arguably somebody could sue us and say, you don't have a zoning ordinance. And when we brought this to the council 2 years ago, council said, okay, we don't want to really tie anybody's hands at all. But we obviously have to be compliant with state law. So the planning office took it back and said, okay, here's the most watered-down version of what we could ever do. And I think it is the most watered-down version of what we could ever do. I guess the only thing we could do that is more watered down than this is to say, if an owner comes in and seeks a rescission of the designation, it shall be granted. That's the only thing that could be more watered down than what you have right here, in my estimation.
When this is designated, is it also on the title for the land? So that if somebody
No.
comes to buy it, could they be surprised later on?
They could be if it's not disclosed.
It would have to be something that's disclosed by the seller or the agent.
But if they don't, there's no way to find out about it.
Well, it's a dereliction of duty,
Well, sure,
especially
that happens
with a
all the
real
time.
estate agent to not
Happens all
disclose
the
something like
time.
that.
Or do your own.
Not at my place.
I'm just trying to protect the buyer and the seller, yeah. Alderman Ellis.
So, the question I have is in restriction of zoning. Assuming that it passes or if it doesn't, but my concern is 10 years, 15, 5 years from now, a builder decides they want to come in and purchases a whole bunch of properties and decides they want to put up condos there. Is there any way for us to restrict that? Is there any language that we can put in there before we go ahead and approve this? Because I've gone up and down on this thing and I don't see anything stating that, hey, that's a no-no, we can't do that.
That's totally, I don't want to, you have to hit
Go
with
ahead.
a zoning issue here. You zone, areas for uses.
Right.
This has got nothing to do with that. There's no correlation between historic designation and zoning of an area or a
Yeah, but over
property.
time, yes, it does, because
No,
of
it
the fact.
doesn't. But I mean, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Thank you. Because of the fact that if we go ahead and we say, okay, we're going to take this as it is, it's the most watered-down version that there is, and we never go ahead and touch this ever again.
Yeah.
Then some individual comes in, some builder, and says, I'm going to go ahead and do a 517 or a 525.
Well, if that's the underlying zoning and they have a right to do it, they have a right to do it.
So how can we?
Then rezone the areas that you don't want to have available for condos.
It goes back to the initial comment that came up with looking at a rezoning from Lou Kavieski. Alderman, I want to hit Alderman Altman Cloth first, then Douglas and Rozak.
I haven't spoken yet.
So I have a
Well,
question,
Rebecca's
going back to the conversation about the residency of the committee. Do we have any other committees or boards in the city that are not completely city residents, like with the exception of like the library, where we have the county appointments and we have the Jefferson County appointment?
There are some statutory committees that are allowed to have non-resident components like Police and Fire Commission, like Zoning Board of Appeals. It's statutory.
We can't do anything.
And then just something I thought of today. when-
You can,
If you do an
in your own ordinance, say,
Okay.
only residents.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
And then the other thing that just kind of popped out when you were giving your presentation earlier was you had talked about, how we have like the facade program for downtown businesses and, would we have some money associated with, preservation or, anything with it? And I don't know, just kind of an off-the-cuff thought is, could theoretically someone come and nominate themselves? There's no fee to nominate yourself. Get on the list, get some money, redo the, your house, and then come back and rescind it.
Sure.
I mean, that's,
Wouldn't that be a good thing?
I mean,
When
would it
it's
be a
not
good
the
thing for
city's
people to
money.
fix up old historic houses? Absolutely. Would it be a good thing for someone to kind of skirt their way around the system just for an easy loan? No.
We
Again-
love our residents.
You would have to approve
What?
the rescinding of that designation.
Okay. And then it's
Well,
just
if
the
you
last
think
thing,
on
going back
the-
to the property rights and kind of what Karen had said, the one thing I think that really kind of, we've had this so many times with different projects. When you purchase a house, look at the city's comp plan, you need to do your due diligence. You need to do your own homework on what you're buying, what's around you, what's potentially around you. So I think, worrying about infringing on people's property rights, I think that's,
We do have an intention to create a map, if we do start getting some people on this local register. We do have an intention within the planning department to create a map, to have that available online.
and
like
if you
we
buy
have.
a house and you don't realize it's on the registry, you buy a house with a dead-end street next to you, and you don't ask some questions, I'm sorry, I don't feel sad for you.
The other strategy that's used within the
I'm
community.
still against Mackenzie, though.
But the other thing that happens is people have these really cool old historic buildings and then they don't maintain them. So they get to a point of demolition. So maybe there's a positive that could come from this. I don't know. But it's still going to be based on the way this is written on the homeowner. Alderman Douglas.
I was just making a comment to Alderman Ellis's comment, I guess. I mean, we would be able to address no condos if the current homeowner is on the list of historic preservation, because then we have the right to say they can't demolish. Correct? So.
Alderman Rozak?
Yeah, really good comments. This is a good debate. I was remiss by saying, Rachel, nice work to start with. I kind of went right in on, comments. I do appreciate the work you guys did to, I think, soften the blow to homeowners arbitrarily from a commission of people that, aren't elected, are randomly appointed, and may not live in the city. So I appreciate that. I do think we should still make that one change on the designation section if we're going to move forward on a vote. I do think we should remove the "or other objects constituting a physical betterment of real property." That's too vague. And I think we should, there's one other change at the end on, 11 and 12. We have separability. I think it's actually supposed to be severability. And then 12, unless I'm wrong there, but I think I'm right. At 12, there's an extra B before forfeit. That's a typo. But that's just really kind of minor stuff. Bottom line for me is I don't think we should restrict people. I do understand that people can voluntarily do it. So I'm not unconvinced by that argument, Matt. I think what kind of also holds me back when I look at this thing is we're adding 8 pages of law to people's property, and somebody designates it, they don't know, they sell. Next thing you know, they're before us asking to get removed or rescinded, or somebody gets on the registry, they sell to someone wants to take it off, and there's a bunch of homeowners around them that now come in and object to us removing them. We almost are creating, in a sense, a political quagmire for ourselves and for our community that maybe, like you said, the whole thing maybe doesn't do a ton of benefit at the end of the day.
So how would you bring us into compliance, though? I mean, we need something.
I think we do this, and we do what Stan recommended, which is we.
Again, recommended.
I understand that. What Stan suggested could make it a little more palatable on that is we remove the city council having to approve the rescission or the commission, that you can ask to get put on. If you're put on, at any time you can ask to be removed. That avoids the quagmire of people, somebody getting put on, everyone liking the historic building, and then, homeowners around them coming in and telling us not to remove it. Now we are restricting their rights. Or maybe somebody buys it, they know it's on it, they don't think it's a big deal, they buy it, now they want to do something different, they want to add a boathouse, they want to add something, and they can't do it. And now the owners around them, pick any area in the city where it's historic, Merchants Platte, the Isthmus, where historic buildings, all the people around them come into this meeting and tell us, don't rescind it. So, so if we're going to do this and it's soft enough, just let the homeowner come back and ask to get it taken off, and it shall be removed.
What about, sorry.
Yeah, and that's okay. I want to come back to,
I'm just-
Alderman
those are
Spiegelberg's
good
been
Alder
waiting for a
points.
while, then we'll come back to you, Alderman Mulder. Thank you for stopping.
This question was like a few ago, but I'll ask it anyway. What's the downside if we don't come into compliance with this, Stan, or in any situation similar to this going forward, where we're not coming into compliance?
I have to tell you to be in compliance with the law.
Alderman Mulder.
And maybe this should be done through zoning and not this. I think what I'm hearing, what I feel is that the rescinding does allow for the demolition of what we have already designated a historic property. And someone buys it, simple rescind, so there's no teeth. We don't even get to consider it. We valued something, we designated it historic. it gets sold and now it's condos. That is a property rights issue. There's no doubt about it, the new owner. But to Jennifer's point, they would know that when they bought it. They would know that this is on a historic, list, and they can't just do what they want, so there's gonna at least have to be that consideration. They won't be surprised there's no lawsuit, because they knew going in they'd have to get it rescinded, and that was a chance they were gonna have to take. So, I don't know if there's a way to craft that and make it rescinded unless it's for demolition, because but that would be the reason to not do that, because it doesn't offer us any protection over places that we have valued, and that the homeowner has valued.
A lot of good discussion, and echo Rachel, awesome job. And Jason, thank you for bringing this back. Legal counsel has recommended that we get in compliance with the law at some point in time. I'd like to entertain a motion. Does anybody like to make a motion?
I would make a motion, but Matt's amendments, would you be willing to make an amended with your amendments, Matt? Or are you, because you're not?
Yeah, I can,
favor of
or
this?
we could, I mean, I think, to me, the cleaner way to do it would be to let them just redraft a couple of those spots.
Okay.
And to me, we don't have to do this today. I mean, we've had a good debate. I've got those 4 or 5 changes. And then I think the only thing that's left to talk about is the rescission, whether we rescind it or not. And maybe they could come back with another option on the rescission.
One approach you could do is you could move forward at some level with those changes, keep the first reading, and then the second reading, if there are any additional changes, then we could move this process forward to get in compliance with the law.
I'd like to see a final version with the changes made, to be honest with you. I don't like to move haphazard, because I'd like to see a red line version with another option for rescission. Like we can
15
only.
years.
What's that?
28, sorry.
28
Yeah, I don't
years and
think
2 weeks.
more weeks is gonna
Yeah,
do us.
yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to sue us between now and, August 2nd or 1st or whatever. That would be my suggestion.
So
but
at this stage, we've had good conversation. I have not entertained a motion yet at this point. It's open for any motion if anybody would like to make one. Alderman Ellis.
I'd like to make a motion that this be the first reading, with the understanding that by the time the second reading happens, whenever that is, that those changes can be talked about and made at some point.
So I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, so if this gets voted down, then what? We're done with the motion, we're gonna put it back? I mean, I'm not gonna vote in favor of doing this because we're not settled on what the exact changes are. I agree with most of them that Matt are recommending, but we should see what it looks like, so.
Well, I don't think, Alderman Ellis, it really matters, because you can always waive the second reading. And I think the indication from the council is that Alderman Rozak is going to share his ideas in writing with the planning department so that they know exactly what he's thinking, and that they already know that Alderman Mulder has some other ideas and wants an alternate proposal relating to how this will apply to demolition. And so they'll probably come up with one version that deals with, hey, this thing's been on the list here locally, I want it off, and it's automatic. And the second one will be, it's not automatic if you want to tear it down. That's what I heard here tonight.
Alderman Ellis, you want to rescind your motion?
I do not. So basically what I hear is, if it is approved here, we go back to planning. And at that point in time, somebody would come and say, these are the changes that we're making, we'd like to make, and that's done at the planning level, it's approved there, and then come back here for
It's
the,
not going to plan commission again.
The planning department is what drafts it.
Planning
I think that's what
department.
he means, yeah. It doesn't go
These
to planning
guys.
commission.
those guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. If I don't rescind, and I'd say, no, I want to go through with the vote, that it goes back to those guys.
Well, there won't be any vote if you have a motion.
Would you let me finish? Is that possible that you can let me finish? I mean, I appreciate it. Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand it. If it passes through the first reading, but we know we want to make changes, and if the changes aren't made in the second reading, it's not going to pass. It goes back to Jason. Jason then makes those changes, at which point in time it comes back in front of us with those changes made that Matt and every other Matt that's in here, okay? That was a joke. And if it doesn't, if their language is not part of that final second reading, it's probably not going to pass. Am I right? Am I understanding that right?
I think the point I'd like to make to you is I think you have the sense from the council that most likely this won't pass because they'd like to see it just fine-tuned now. So that is your choice whether you want to keep the motion or not. But the thought process, what I'm seeing from the other aldermen, and we have not voted on it, is that, hey, here are some changes we'd like to make. Let's finalize those changes. It goes back to the planning department, and we can bring it back at the next council and bring it with those changes to try to have the language exactly the way everyone feels more comfortable with it. And at that point, it can be the first reading again, but that can be waived depending upon what you guys want to do. That's my interpretation.
My only concern is that we need to get this done, and we need to get into compliance. And I don't want to push this can down the road anymore. I want to start doing something and putting something in law so that at the end of the day, we know that we're now in compliance. Now, just because it's the first reading doesn't make it law. It's the second reading if it passes.
Correct.
So if that's my understanding.
So to maybe help you is that we have the commitment to get the language to the planning department to try to get right the first time. And that you have my commitment that this will be on the next council meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, then I rescind.
Because then
I rescind.
the timing of it really won't change if you decide to waive the first reading, but you don't have to.
I'm not going to waive the first reading, but I want to make sure that we get this done, and that this can is not kicked down the road anymore, because this is something that's embarrassing. It's not been done, and it needs to get done. So I'm going to rescind, but in 2 weeks.
It'll be on the
I'd like for
council.
this to, thank you.
And so you've rescinded your motion, you rescind the second, Alderman Maroney? So at this point, no motion is brought forward. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. And I would just request that the information, Jason, gets to your office and we get this turned around quickly, Attorney Riffle, so this can be on the next agenda.
Don't look at me.
Just turn around quickly. Sound good?
Mayor, I'll have a few changes. I'll have my 4 or 5 changes over that I
If you could do them
discussed tonight.
quickly, that'd be great. That'll just help us with our
It'll be
documentation.
done
So,
tomorrow.
very well done. The lively discussion is not a reflection on your preparation, your work. It was spectacular. Compliments to you. Let's move on to the next item, presentation and discussion regarding the inventory of the comprehensive land use plan amendments between 2014 and 2023. You're back up, Rachel.
Oh, boy.
Yep, round 2. Okay.
The pan into the fire, right?
This one should be a little bit less controversial. This is not an action item. This is just a tool that we are bringing forward from the planning department for you guys to use going forward. So pretty much since 2014, we've had 20 different amendments to the comprehensive plan. And we're starting to realize that, okay, it might be kind of good to kind of keep track of these things as we're going forward, and you guys are considering, potential other amendments to the comprehensive plan in the future. We figured it would be nice for you guys to kind of get a sense of what have previous councils done, what types of properties, or what types of land uses have been amended in the past. So of those 20 amendments, we found that 19 of them were land use amendments, and then one of them was the incorporation of that park and open space plan. And then in addition, just one thing to note is that the 2050 comprehensive plan was adopted in November of 2019. And then you can all see that on your spreadsheets that you all should have about the the amendments, the black line there shows when the new comprehensive plan was adopted. Just a brief summary, there have been, of those 20 amendments, 480 acres of land use, of land has been amended, the use has been amended. And then just for a little bit of, some of you might say, oh, that sounds high. Well, the most recent one, Old Highlander, 235 acres, was by far the most significant change that has happened. And then 70 acres was Pabst Farms, and then all of the other amendments totaled 173 acres. So in your packets, you all should have a map. So what we did was we put together a map that kind of shows you where all of these developments are happening. At the bottom of your map, there's all the numbers, and they are in order of, chronological order of when these amendments happened. And then what we did was we broke it down by section, and we gave you all a section that was blown up of each of these 6 sections on the map, so that you get a little bit more detail there about what the previous land use was, what the new land use is, what year that these amendments happened, and then all of that corresponds with the spreadsheet, of course. So that's pretty much the gist of this. The reason that we did this was just a couple different reasons, mostly to keep track of these land use changes, and then it helps set a precedent for the type of development that previous councils have decided this merits a comprehensive plan amendment. So you can use that going forward to say, okay, well, this is what we've done amendments for in the past. What should we be doing amendments for now? And then in addition, it provides a visual representation of where these are occurring, not just for you guys, but also for the general public. So sometimes these amendments happen and people are still able to see the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2019, and these amendments may not be reflected on that map. So this provides a good resource for looking at, okay, what is the actual land use? Because that comprehensive plan does not get updated every single year. So that is pretty much the tool that we have for you guys. Again, it's not an action item, just something for you to have going forward.
Any questions or comments for Rachel or for Mr. Gala?
Really helpful, especially since not having been part of many of these or most of these. It's great. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you. Let's move on to presentation and discussion regarding the proposed future amendments to the City of Oconomowoc Chapter 20 Floodplain Ordinance.
Just have her stay up.
Jason, you can go home.
You will leave too.
Okay, again, this one is just for discussion. So pretty much what has happened is that we received a letter from FEMA in April that says you need to update your floodplain ordinance. If we don't, then we will be suspended from the National Flood Insurance Program, which we do not want. They gave us a deadline of October 19th to comply. So we're bringing this forward now just for a discussion, just as an introduction, because it is a pretty lengthy document. It deals with a whole chapter of the municipal code, so we wanted you guys to get eyes on it before we brought it for action. It will be coming to Plan Commission for recommendation on August 2nd, I believe, and then it should be on the August 15th council agenda for action as well. So we do need to adopt something by October, otherwise we will be suspended from that program. So what the planning department did, and you should all have copies of this, is that we created a redlined copy here that shows you our initial ordinance, and then it shows you the changes that have been made to it based on what the DNR has been recommending. So we've been working with contacts at the DNR. They sent us over this draft ordinance that says, if you adopt this, you'll be in compliance, everything will be good. So we figured you would have questions about, okay, what kinds of things have changed? So that's what your redlined copy is. And then we also provided a clean copy of the new proposed ordinance. So the main update here is that there's new flood insurance rate maps and a new flood insurance study for Waukesha County that have been conducted, and those things need to be incorporated into our ordinance. In addition, there's been some extra standards added for structures in a campground, which I don't believe we have in Oconomowoc. There was some additional standards that are just applicable to the mechanical and utility equipment elevation requirements in all floodplain districts. Some extra things about non-conforming use. So our previous ordinance had a lot of stuff or our current ordinance, I should say, has a lot of stuff about non-conforming structures in floodplains. And then this new ordinance adds some stuff about non-conforming use. So I put the section numbers up there, so I encourage you to take a look at that. They included some additional regulations for structures in the floodway and then some additional floodproofing standards. So right now, what we're asking you to do is just take a look over this ordinance, get familiar with it, get familiar with those changes before it comes back in August for when we'll need to vote on it. We have sent over a timeline to the DNR that they had to approve. They're good with this approval, so if we approve things as we should in August, everything should be on track to get everything completed before October. So this is pretty much our proposed timeline going forward. Tonight we're discussing. This week we will send it off to the DNR. They need to do a final review of our ordinance and a final approval of that. We'll put it on that Plan Commission agenda, coming back to council for action, and then the ordinance will go into effect on October 19th. So if you have questions or discussion right now, feel free. Otherwise, this will come back in a few weeks.
Well, and thank you for being so proactive, giving us time, because these are language that we're probably not very comfortable reading. So thank you. Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I was going to say the same thing. Giving us a chance to really dig into this for an extra couple of weeks is huge. You know, over the weekend, this was pretty brutal to get through. And I tried. Hey, is the additions that you're putting in mandatory state? But, you know, in other words, can we not get around any of this language if we don't like it?
I believe we can change stuff in this, but we do have to, it would have to be approved by the DNR.
Still has
So
to be approved.
if you have
Okay.
something you want changed, feel free to let us know and we would incorporate that. We do need to get a draft to the DNR because they need time to review it before we bring it back to Plan
So if there's a
Commission.
significant change after the DNR approves and we change something by the next meeting, or we think we don't like whatever, subpart 3C, you're going to have to send that back to them and say, hey, there was this tweak to this.
We'll have to let them know what the change was
Okay.
and they'll have to
And they'll have to
decide.
approve. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and if we do that, will they be responsive, or do we have to wait 6 months because we do have a deadline?
So far, we've had pretty efficient communication with them.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll help, good. And Alderman, this was also presented to the Plan Commission a couple weeks ago, so they had the heads up on July 5th. So, thank you very much. Well done. On to new business, consider act on resolution 23-R3146, authorizing funding for tourism initiatives and a budget amendment. Mr. Duffy.
Good evening. As part of our budgeting strategic conversations, one of the things that came up was for us to take a look at tourism budget reserves, come up with some ideas, present those to Tourism Commission, and then bring those here for your authorization. So I just wanted to walk through some of those. We did meet on July 10th with the Tourism Commission about some of these. The other thing that we were asked to do is forecast out the utilization of some of these funds from today, 2023 to 2026. So I included that spreadsheet that I presented to them in your packets as well. So some of them that we're going to try to do to continue to do promotion for the community. One of the elements that you kind of already authorized, so it's not an additional $40,000, it's $20,000 that Tourism Commission approved earlier this year. Those funds were transferred, you approved those last night. However, tourism doesn't have authorization to spend them until you do a budget amendment. So in your memo, it says $40,000, so that was $20,000 that's already been transferred, and then an additional $20,000. That's really necessary to start some of the design work in order for Oz Plaza to continue to happen and be prepared for that for next year. Grading work, some engineering work, and some of those things in the authorization to spend it. As we see the success of Oz Plaza, there's been requests for certain type of things, Glinda being one of them, as well as a nod to the coroner, Meinhard Robbie, who is from the Exonia area. So in reaching out to the company that created those, Glinda, they kind of would modify an existing mold. The coroner actually has to be created. So we've gotten a cost to be able to do that. but also want funds appropriated so we can place those orders and make sure we have them in time for the recognition of the Oz Plaza in 2024. Another one is, as we've talked about, we used to have at what's now Veterans Park, the historic marker on the left. That has been in storage since that was put up in 2015. So we've kind of proposed, and have proposed since John Lavinia Rockwell Park became a city property, would it be appropriate to put a bronze historic marker at that location, given that is where Oconomowoc got its name, where the waters fall, where the waters meet. So not to use the one to the left, but Tourism Commission to spend on an actual bronze plaque, giving it the significance it is. That's why I showed the ones from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if you've ever seen it. So dollars for that. Other concept that came out is, similar to what's been done in other communities, do we light our bridges? So in coordination with the electric utility, do some things to add some additional illumination to the bridges, to the railings, to be able to accommodate and investigate that as we move forward. Another thing from a standpoint, well, what we understand is a lot of people like taking pictures in our community and images. Some of the things that have been done in state parks is the selfie stations, buying materials to be able to do that. Work with the Oconomowoc High School building trades classes, find locations, and have some materials to prepare things like that for people to, again, share their experience and their time they're having in our community. In collaboration with our Parks Department, and providing additional opportunities for people to get out on the water, in investigating kayak rental kiosks, maybe at Fowler Park, Riverside, or Bender Beach, some of those areas. People who are visitors to our community have an automated opportunity through an app, rent a kayak, and all the materials are right there for a seamless transaction. And I don't have anything on the transient pier that was added at the last minute. So that's an element, as I understand it, in collaboration with the town of Oconomowoc, Village of Lac La Belle, matching our money to be able to put additional transient pier in the vicinity of City Beach. That the Parks Department would investigate the appropriate location for that.
Questions or comments for Mr. Duffy? Alderman
I have
Rozak?
a couple. The couple of things we took off are still in investigation. The Adirondack chairs is one thing I'm completely against. I think they're awful, and it's a complete waste of money. The selfie stands, I was for at the Tourism Commission last week, but the more I think about it, what is it, like $8 grand, $8 grand for selfies?
Just an estimate.
Yeah, I understand.
Of materials. Do we do them wood? Do we do them the composite plastic, which is a little bit more expensive? That's how we've been doing some of our signage here in the community.
I like, I don't mind the characters. I think Oz Plaza is cool. We should move forward with it. But when we start spending money on things like selfie stands and big Adirondack chairs, I start to wonder more and more if we're overtaxing our room tax people and putting in $8,000 selfie stands. So the transient pier I'm okay with, I guess. Do we really need it? What do you mean it was a last minute ad? Who added it?
I guess there was a conversation between Parks and the town and
Town,
village.
yeah. There's not enough,
Administration about, is there a need for additional?
yeah, the thought is to try to bring more business downtown. People that live on the lake, that one pier is full. So the goal was to potentially extend it.
How many more? Like two more?
Two sections,
More sections?
and just make it a little longer.
Well, I think that's probably way more useful than selfie stands as far as bringing in, attractions and people. I'll wait for everyone else's comments. I like everything else on here. I think the bridge lighting probably looks a little brighter there. Something I actually brought to the Tourism Commission as an idea after I visited Grand Rapids, Michigan. They light up all their bridges over the river, and it really looks cool. And it's not bright. The way to do it right is a very low, soft light. that attracts your eye but doesn't take away from the surrounding areas. And there's a way to do it that's really cool.
So Alderman Altman-Cloth?
So my concern is with the selfie stands. Like, how many are you thinking? Do you have an idea of where you want to place them?
Not completely. We talked about, do you have an opportunity to create one on North Lake Drive facing to the west at a sunset? Do you have the ability to work with the school district and put one at the high point on Nature Hill?
Yeah, because my concerns with
Is
them.
there an opportunity at Chapman Park?
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity at Riverside Park?
My concern with them, when I first saw them at, I think it was Lapham on the Prairie side when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that was kind of neat. But then you kind of watched it get worn, and the maintenance wasn't always necessarily kept up on it. And, there was a few of them that actually do kind of obstruct views where, we have beautiful views in the city. And, I don't know, I guess the placement of them would be really, really key. But, if it's $8,000 in the budget just to get them, what's in the budget to keep them looking nice? Because, the one at Lapham, I think deteriorated kind of quickly. And then as for the chairs, they're great, and I appreciate them.
Those big, huge ones?
The plastic ones and the, like,
No.
No,
These
no.
are the big ones
Oh.
you take a picture in like Stoley's had.
oh, gosh, no, that would
Yeah.
be disgusting.
Those are not being
No,
brought forward
that's-
here.
That's like, that's like you go to Stoley's and that's like a gimmicky.
And that originally came up as, do you put it at the beach, at the ballpark?
No, well, they can have it at the ballpark if they
The
want. but
Tourism
keep that out of
Commission pretty
downtown.
much said no. So I think.
Okay, good.
So
I thought he was
yeah.
criticizing the Duffy chairs.
No, not the small ones.
Alderman Spiegelberg and then Alderman
I get criticized by that.
Shellpepper.
I love them.
And there are a lot of good ideas here, but I think we need to be careful that we keep preserving the natural beauty of our community, and I'm not for the lights on the bridges. I think we're going to get a lot of pushback from people on both lakes, because it's, no matter how low it is, it's still light pollution on our beautiful lakes.
Alderman Shellpepper.
Yeah, I probably agree with on the selfie thing, probably not great, but I appreciate you bringing it forward. Your directive was to bring forward ideas, right? So you're not saying the selfie sticks are the greatest thing, it's just something you're putting forward as a recommendation.
One of the
or as a-
greatest opportunities we have as a community is to share images of our community.
Yeah, no, I get it. So I appreciate you putting that forward. I think the council would probably, doesn't think that's a great idea. The room tax piece, though, we're having more hotels built here, so I don't think we've been killing anybody in terms of wanting to build an Oconomowoc by a too burdensome room tax. I think we're at the right level, understanding that we have a lot of money, in the reserve, and now we're figuring out how to spend that better, whether it's, figuring out we can allocate more towards your salary, but there's a way, I think we're at the right number. We're just not leveraging those dollars correctly for the best interest of our community, and that's what we're doing now. That's why you're putting forward these ideas. A lot of good stuff on here. What's the action that we're looking for tonight? on
Yeah,
this
the
then?
main time piece here that Bob's looking for are the figurines, because they take time to build.
Yeah.
And the work at the Oz Plaza, the goal is to have the Oz Plaza done by June 1st, because next year will be the 85th anniversary.
Well-
So Bob, if you'd want to rephrase that for the group, that would probably help on what you would like them to vote on.
Yeah, and essentially, I need a budget amendment to be able to spend any of this money. So the resolution was set up based on the recommendation of the Tourism Commission of $125,000. That's what all these items are. If you change that amount of money, because essentially, I can't spend any of the money because it's in a reserve fund.
Right.
So that budget amendment allows me to transfer it over, so the resolution says, over to the tourism fund and start implementing projects. Because right now, I can't do that.
So we're doing a blanket number, and you're going to implement all the projects that you proposed
what
right
I've
here, based on
identified-
that number that you provided, which was 120, or what did we say?
125. And I've tried, and then I've estimated what those elements are. So if you say, we don't want you to do 2 of those, and that takes off $18,000 if I'm reading.
And, the other approach is this is a recommendation from tourism of what they liked to move forward on, and that's what you have to decide as policymakers. Also, you can utilize some of these discussions later in the operating budget and the capital budget as we go forward. The thing that's critical are the figurines.
Yeah.
Those are very
And
critical.
Oz Plaza, for sure.
And Oz Plaza, those two things. So I think if you looked at a dollar amount, so that can get started, we're able to use a lot of our internal workers to get the Oz Plaza done, so we're not spending a ton of money on it. So that's really what our hope and our goal is. If you look at the pier extension, that really is shifted into, there's no reason to do it now. That would be for 2024. We're already halfway through the summer.
So for,
Alderman Altman-Cloth.
so for the, I mean, if there's more discussion, obviously have more discussion, but I mean, for the sake of the time and the figurines, so could we just make a motion to approve, what would it be, $67,000 to move forward on Oz Plaza and Oz Characters Glinda in the corner?
And put the rest in the regular
And
budget.
put
and
the rest,
Debate those things
and
out.
debate those ones later.
Yeah, yeah.
So I will make a motion for those two for $67,000 for just Oz Plaza and the Oz Characters.
Second.
Second, any further discussions or
Yeah.
comments? Alderman Shellpepper.
Well, and nobody's watching, but it's important to understand.
Tomorrow they will watch. Tomorrow.
The tourism dollars, right, can only be spent on tourism-related, initiatives for the city. These dollars are collected from the hotels and the room tax in our city. Our hotels, like I said, are continuing to expand, they're growing, so I just, I think for like the average person in Oconomowoc, they think we're spending levy dollars on this, and that's definitely, it's not property taxes that.
And
that are
that's
being
what Bob's looking for, is he's looking for a dollar amount so we can start working on these projects.
Right.
That's what the proposal is.
Right, well, and dollars that are from room taxes.
From room-
And so
yes,
this-
not
these-
levy.
These are things that are gonna continue to bring more business to those hotels, because as much as I'm not a big fan of the plaza, I understand like tons of people are, and that it brings people here, and that it's a great attraction. So what we can do to invest in that through room tax dollars that aren't being used right now properly, we should do it, and it's the right thing to do.
Alderman Rozak.
Yeah, I like pulling all those out, because I do think there probably should be more discussion about the kiosks, the selfie stands, and the bridge lighting, especially if there's some concerns. Well, the one thing I said in the Tourism Commission, what I'd like the Tourism Commission to do, and what I recommended last week to Bob and that commission, is to start thinking big. I don't think selfie stands and, bridge lighting is thinking big enough. We have some really cool spots around the lakes. One of them is the Lake Walk, and a lot of spots in the Lake Walk are deteriorating. You have parts around the bridge where it's like literally almost ready to fall into the lake. We have an opportunity, I think, there to really think big. We're getting a lot of room tax in. We've got a lot of money right now. And I think we should think as a city big. What do we do to make that Lake Walk special? Do we put in some special low lighting? Do we redo the concrete nice? Do we stain it red? Do we do something to really say this is a huge attraction for our city, and fix up the area and make it nice? I mean, so I've encouraged the Tourism Commission to start thinking big. I mean, don't worry about the Adirondack chairs and selfie stands. Let's do something really, really cool that's gonna bring, the Lake Walk around Lake Geneva is a big attraction.
Yeah.
Huge attraction. People come from outside of the state to come and do that.
Yep.
We have something that is, I think, as cool in some sense, walking through the city and around the lakes and all our shops. And we should really engage in that and forget about some of these little piddly things.
And council members, I think we have a motion and a second.
Yeah.
We're still in discussion. Bob has put together a 3-year budget, looking at those, and has come up with some bigger items. We're just not ready yet to present all of those to you. So what Alderman Rozak is talking about has been discussed at tourism, and they're still working on those things. So there's some other cool things that haven't been shown yet. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Alderman Maroney.
I know that this is kind of secondary. I understand that we need to move forward with Oz Plaza, but I'm interested in the plaques for the city, updating those. How many were we going to put in? Did you have any idea, and where?
The which plaques?
The original, the historic
The
plaques.
historic marker, we would just have one, we'd have one designed into John Lavinia Rockwell Park.
Okay.
So we've already shared kind of that idea with SEH, who Parks is working with, to locate it on the most updated site plan. You guys are at 60% plan, I believe. They are now gonna site locate that on that plan.
Okay.
And then tourism would refine the language, collaboration with the Historical Society, and then actually purchase the plaque to be placed.
Yeah, I just think it's really important. I think it's a necessary thing that we look forward in the future.
Again, we don't want it to be the old wooden one. We want to
Yeah,
upgrade the look
upgrade.
of it, given that special place.
Sure.
And its significance to the
Alderman Mulder.
Oh, just my likes and dislikes. I agree with Karen that the bridge lighting, I think that I was just up in the Dark Knight State Park, and it's phenomenal. Light pollution's a huge problem. It interferes with migration and mating and everything else, and should be not encouraged in my mind. And then I think the transient boat, especially once the boardwalk continues to develop, to be able to have people from out of town or on the lake come park there, use everything downtown, is a true money generator. So those are my thoughts. We'll debate them later.
Call roll, please. Remember, this is a budget amendment. We need supermajority.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
Aye.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak.
Aye.
Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
Aye.
On to, we have no staff reports moving forward. Do we have any reports or comments from the alderman?
I do.
Alderman Ellis?
Yeah, I had a conversation the other day with a member of my gym, and she's lived in the city now for well over 60 years. And her concern was as far as the special events that we have here and our parking and things along those lines. And she came up with a solution that I think we're already looking into, but I just wanted to bring it up to you guys, and that was in reference to shuttling at specific areas for these events. So maybe we'd have a shuttle at the Pick and Save, or maybe we'd have a shuttle someplace where there's a great bit of parking, and then we can go ahead and shuttle people from there. And what caught my attention was that she also mentioned that if we charged for it $1, $2, that people probably wouldn't push back on that. So I just wanted to go ahead and bring that to your attention. Also, over the last, I want to say 2 weeks, I've had a tremendous amount of individuals, and I mean, I lost count, of out-of-towners that have come to visit Oconomowoc for one reason or another. And one of the questions I asked was, why? Why is it that they find that they want to come to Oconomowoc instead of some other place, like Lake Geneva or some other place along those lines? And each and every one of them, without even soliciting them, was they love the lakes. They loved eating up on the, as a matter of fact, my pastor said this. He came here and ate at the restaurant over here on the corner, up on the roof, and looked at the lake, and he just loved it. And he was one of very many that have stated that to me. And also the family and the family atmosphere that there seems to be here. Everybody says hello to everybody, and everybody's smiling, and you just feel safe and secure here. So I just want to just thank council for all the hard work that you guys do, and understand that people notice it.
Any other comments from Alderman? Alderman Spiegelberg.
This is my annual and shameless plea to get out to the Waukesha County Fair, which starts on Wednesday and goes through Sunday. I'm proud to say that all three of my daughters were affairs to the fair in the past, and our family's been involved with the 4-H program there for about 25 years. So get out there and enjoy the Waukesha County Fair, which is the oldest and, in my opinion, the best county fair in the state of Wisconsin.
2 to 5 Saturday, 4 on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
Shameless plugs.
Alderman Rozak.
Just something I'm following up on an email I had sent a while back, and actually I think I had talked to Alderman Ellis about this a while ago as well. I've had quite a few additional complaints from the folks that live around me in the Pabst Farms area about that intersection between Fleet Farm and the Hilton Garden Inn. I don't know if anybody's turned there, but if you're turning left out of the Fleet Farm or in front of the Hilton, well, really if you're turning left either way, but basically there, you're basically crossing an 8-lane intersection. It is the worst, in my opinion, intersection in the city, other than maybe some of the roundabouts that people still all know how to drive through. So it will encourage our police department. Actually, I don't think I copied the chief on the first email. I think I copied DPW on the first one. But we need to get out there and look at it and do something, whether it's stop signs or lights or something. More lines also need to be across that area. It's a willy-nilly kind of drive whatever side of the road you want to drive on around that area. It's really wide and it probably needs turn lanes. So I think some of that in lining properly could help in that area. So I just think we need to do something. Several folks have said they almost have gotten hit there, turning left, cars coming in. It's like crossing interstate. It's that wide there because you've got turn lanes and then 2 lanes and then another turn lane. So it's like 8 lanes crossing if you're turning left from Hilton Garden Inn. So we just have to do something about it before something really bad happens there. So that's
Thank
my
you.
spiel.
Any
for
other
my
comments from Alderman? With no further comments and no comments from the mayor, we are going to move into room 3 for the closed session. And then at the end of the closed session, we'll close the closed session and actually adjourn the Common Council meeting from room 3. So per Wisconsin State Statute 19.851E, deliberating, negotiating, and purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically regarding costs associated with the proposed Old Highlander department. I'd like to entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I call roll on that? I'm sorry, call roll, please.
Alderman Shell Pepper.
Aye.
Alderman Maroney.
okay, I missed that.
Alderman Douglas.
Aye.
Alderman Rozak. Alderman Altman Cloth.
Aye.
Alderman Ellis.
Aye.
Alderman Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Alderman Mulder.
That's fine. We now go into closed session.